Everywhere in the United States today, I find confusion, uncertainty, and fear. Fear of a new war, of an oncoming depression, of growing waves of racial discrimination.
This almost looks like it could have been filmed last week, but it wasn't.
To that end, I announce that I will run as an independent candidate in 1948 for President of the United States.
Blaze of publicity awaiting the acceptance address of its presidential candidate, Henry Wallace.
I say that as long as 90% of our atomic energy investigation is being devoted toward preparation for war, that the human race is in deadly peril. We live in fear. The Russians live in fear. It is time for both of us to live with a sense of peace.
Wallace became secretly enthralled with a bizarre mystic from Russia. Nicholas Constantine Roerich dispensed a philosophy of occult teachings. Wallace was under a strange cultic influence and control by Roerich, which became evident through a series of handwritten letters. These letters would later become Wallace's political undoing. Wallace claimed to have written a book which became very influential. This book misled Americans into thinking that communist Russia would not attempt to overthrow the government in China. But the Russians did intervene. The influence of Wallace's secret communist friends cost America dearly. Wallace later admitted that he had actually written the book with the help of a number of secret communist associates who worked as ghostwriters. Although Wallace, in his run for the presidency, was later proven to be a traitor to our nation, the influence of communists, terrorists, Islamic extremists, and other self-declared enemies of the United States on Barack Obama has become far, far more obvious than in the case of Henry Wallace.
What do you make of the situation with Senator Obama?
I was introduced to him by a friend who's raising money for him. The friend's name is Dr. Khalid al-Mansour. He is the principal advisor to one of the world's richest men. Would you please write a letter in support of him? That's because before Obama decided to run. And he interjected the advice that Obama had taken and passed the requirements necessary to get into Harvard and become president of the law review. That's before he ever ran for anything.
And this is before the world knew of Barack Obama.
That's right. That's right.
When, where, and how should he endorse Barack Obama? And I want to approach that from a strategy point of view. If Bill Clinton follows this strategic plan, he will have one of the biggest audiences in the history of America. I decided, this is what Barack says, in Hawaii, I'm going to be an African American.
How do you categorize these two people? the Prophet Muhammad and Jesus Christ.
The Muslims do not regard Jesus as the Son of God because Jesus did not regard himself as the Son of God. We know that the Christians have a slight problem. They start at a slight disadvantage. The Muslims have some advantages, the Muslims have some disadvantages. Some of the disadvantages of the Christians is that the church fathers were the architects of apartheid. You read and you pass the message to your brother. Read. It has to become like an addiction. I think the Muslims have an advantage. We will never tell the Africans that they didn't have a part in Islam. We're never going to paint anyone white. We're going to tell everyone what they look like. But Islam changes the brother. I want to tell them there was a time when my ancestors walked on this continent. I will show you in Mexico today, in Mexico City, the statues of the Africans. The University of Timbuktu provided navigational skills. We studied astronomy. We studied navigation. And we made the trip. The Aztecs told the story. They described the copper content in the spear, the same spear as in Guinea. Napoleon said this became a problem. He said the Christians started out all right, but after the death of Jesus, they changed everything. Napoleon said this is idolatry. He said, I long for the day that Islam takes over the world, and what I would like to do is to take over Islam so I could rule the world.
No background checks were required for Henry Wallace, and still, no government background checks are required to run for president today. Investigating the history and secret intentions of a candidate is supposed to be the prerogative of the press. But what happens when the press doesn't do its job? Although Mansour seems to be at the core of Obama's design and support. Also, Obama's father, stepfather, and teen mentor were communists. He is helping his own cousin to stage an Islamic uprising in Kenya, and he's even using his cousin's campaign slogan here in the U.S. He is also surrounded by a constellation of radical, anti-American, communist, and Islamic supremacist friends, supporters, and associates. The list is just too long to mention here. In his own defense, he won't or can't provide a valid birth certificate, college records, thesis papers, Senate records, medical records, military draft registration, or baptismal record.